morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm your host, Jesse Weber, and thank you so much for joining us today in a day that is filled with a brand new trial and some special segments. You're not going to want to miss any of it. For anybody who's been following our case, the brand new case that we've been covering out of California, we're going to continue coverage around 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Central Pacific Time. This is the case of Jason Riley King. This is that former Marine who is accused of driving the wrong way while drunk, which led to a head-on freeway collision. It's really horrific. It ended up killing 2 UCSD medical students and Lee who was 24 years old, and Madison Cornwell, who was 23 years old. This accident also resulted in the injuries of 3 other people. Really, really sad to hear about these young people who were killed as a result of a senseless driving accident. Now, Jason Riley King, however, faces some serious legal trouble. He faces 2 counts of first-degree murder. I want you to think about that for a second. First-degree murder in this kind of case, that's what makes it super unique, and we keep talking about it with our analysts and guests that come on, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. He is also charged with 2 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter while impaired, resulting in great bodily injuries, and driving with the blood alcohol content in excess of 0.08, 0.14, causing injury. That is some pretty serious charges, and he faces up to 30 years to life, plus 14 years in prison if convicted. He had rejected 2 previous plea deals to plead guilty to lesser crimes, would have faced a lesser time in prison, but he is pleading not guilty right now. Now, the prosecution has, we saw in their opening arguments yesterday, they said that he knew the dangers of drinking and driving, but chose to get behind the wheel after a night of partying. That is why they came up with that murder charge. Well, the defense is saying this is not a murder case at all. He was overcharged. Our client was overcharged here. However, he is guilty, and he should be found guilty of gross vehicular manslaughter and DUI causing injury, a lesser offense. Now we are going to continue our coverage. We are going to continue that trial and see which way the defense and the prosecution will craft their arguments, and will it be enough for a jury? It looks like he's definitely going to be found guilty, but what will he be found guilty of? We'll continue to talk about that a little bit later on. There's another case that we want to talk about out of Titusville, Florida. We don't have a live feed in that case yet because it's still in jury selection. This is the case of William Woodward. We've been talking about it all this past week. This guy is alleged to have opened fire on Labor Day weekend in 2012, killing two individuals, firing 31 shots and killing 39-year-old Gary Hembry and 44-year-old Roger Pecor. What we believe is this was a result of some sort of ongoing dispute between the neighbors. And from all accounts, it believes that Mr. Woodward will be claiming self-defense, that this was a justifiable homicide. We should also note that reports indicate that Mr. Woodward, who was a war veteran, may suffer from PTSD and a brain injury. How that will factor into that case should be pretty interesting to follow, and you're not going to want to miss that. And as soon as we have a live feed in that case, we will make sure to go to it. Hopefully we expect to have live coverage beginning tomorrow. So we do have those live, two new live trials here on the Law&Crime Network. But right now, I want to give you an update in a case that we have been covering. How many of you out there remember the Jeffrey Willis case? This really riveting case from 2017. Well, anybody who's been following it knows there's another character, Kevin Bluhm. Kevin Bluhm is the cousin of Jeffrey Willis. Now, yesterday, he walked out of the Muskegon County Jail in Michigan hours after he was sentenced to time served for being an accessory after the fact in the murder of Jessica Haringa. Now, for all those who've been following this case, Haringa was 25 years old. She vanished from the Norton Shores gas station where she worked on the night of April 26, 2013, and authorities say that Jeffrey Willis killed her. He's scheduled to stand trial in March. However, Bluhm told investigators that he helped his cousin bury Haringa's body not far from Willis's home. He then said that that was a lie. He recanted. That led to a perjury charge and eventually a guilty plea. But authorities actually believe that what Bluhm was saying might be partially true, which is why he was charged with being an accessory after the fact. On November 27, 2017, Bluhm pled no contest to the accessory charge. That was a day before his trial was set to begin. And now he's out free. And we're going to have to figure out why this happened. And I'm really excited because we have a very special guest with us right now, criminal defense attorney Marc I Glork. Marc, great to have you back here. Great to have you. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. A lot of people are upset. A lot of people don't understand how the criminal justice system works and how this process works. They think a guy who helped bury a body, why is he out free? So if you can help explain, why is this guy now out free?
Well, let's start in general. Every single person who's accused of a crime has to be calculated. We have to figure out what points apply to each of the charges, and then there's a range, a sentencing range. This is generally, every state does things differently, but in this particular jurisdiction, the judge was bound by the sentencing guidelines, and the judge wanted to sentence him to something more, but couldn't because the guidelines called for a certain range, and he had essentially served the maximum that he could have gotten based upon the guidelines.
Now, you're in this system, you are in the criminal justice system, you see how it works. Do you think there needs to be some sort of revision to the sentencing guidelines when you have this kind of result?
Well, the direct answer is maybe, but not necessarily. It might work in 99% of the cases for most people. Accessory after the fact, while a very serious charge, isn't murder. So the legislators want to treat it differently. In this particular case, because emotions are running high, because of his involvement, because of him lying, the public, they're outraged. They have every reason to be outraged. I don't know, though, that that means that you go back and you change the laws that would normally fit 99% appropriately in other cases.
Yeah, he has been sentenced, what the guidelines was, he could have been sentenced between 0 to 9 months behind bars for the crime, but he had already spent 476 days behind bars, so he had to be released. The idea that he pled no contest to the accessory after the fact, what does that tell you?
Well, it means, again, people have this misnomer about no contest. No contest means you're not admitting your guilt, you're just not contesting it. It's the way to get you to the sentence, and it's a softer way to do so. It originally came about because you didn't want people not pleading guilty because they were worried about being sued civilly. A no contest plea came about really because of that. But what he's saying is, I'm just not going to contest it, and I'll take whatever penalty, knowing that the worst he can get is walking out the door of the jail. And it
worked out for him, but he's not entirely free. So he is sentenced, he is ordered to serve 5 years probation, and he's ordered to wear a GPS device. Now, a GPS device, does that do anything really? Does that restrict his life in any way?
Well, typically they're allowed to go to work, they're allowed to go to church, they're allowed to go to the doctor. I tell my wife all the time, and I tell my clients, look, my life is one big house arrest. You know, I get to do a couple things, and I come home, and I'm here with my family.
Right.
If you're a law-abiding citizen, it's problematic because you can't go see the latest movie. But at the same time, if you're not a law-abiding citizen, it could be problematic because people say it's a setup for failure because you wind up committing one minor criminal offense and now you're looking at, the maximum possible sentence.
Now that part's interesting. That part's interesting what you just said is that if he does one thing that goes outside the boundaries, he could be going back to jail. Assistant Prosecutor Matt Roberts urged the judge to add this electronic tether as part of Bluhm's probation restrictions. He said, to drive home to Mr. Bluhm the point that in the eyes of the court, the eyes of the law enforcement, and indeed the eyes of the community will be on him as he walks through the probationary term. This guy's out walking around. I wonder how many people from the community will see him and berate him or what. I wonder what his life will be like as he steps out into the real world.
Well, that's their constitutional right. They want to yell things at him. They're permitted to do so. That's what makes this country great. People have opinions. They can express those opinions. And if he's my client, I say, don't engage, turn around, walk away, because these people are looking for ways to get you to violate, to send you back to prison where they think that you belong.
So we know that Jeffrey Willis was convicted in the 2014 shooting death of Rebecca Blech. We covered it here on the Law&Crime Network. That was more than a year, though, after it was believed that Harenga was killed. So among the protesters that we saw yesterday when Bluhm was released were Rebecca Blech's family members, and they wore shirts that said, your silence killed. Your silence killed my sister. And that he's a murderer. If Mr. Bluhm had said something, that their family member, Rebecca Blech, would have been alive. I would like your thoughts on that.
They have every right to feel that way, period. Morally is one thing. They could feel that he's as guilty as Willis. They could think that he deserves to go to prison for the rest of his life. I will never take that away. I can only imagine what they are going through. I can't even plausibly analogize it to anything in my life. That being said, what's moral and how you feel emotionally is very different than legal. And unfortunately, people get very upset because the law doesn't punish defendants the way that they want. It doesn't match their emotions and their feelings about a case. That happens all too often. And in this case, that's how they feel. Getting 476 days in jail is not enough. They want to see him go away for years, and I understand that.
And there's no we talk about it so much in this show, and you and I, Mark, know from law school, we talk about this idea of if you do something, is it foreseeable what could result from it? And obviously, I don't think it's fair to say that if he would have reported Mr. Willis to the authorities, then it would have prevented Mr. Willis from committing another crime. But is that so fair to say? Is there any kind of legal mechanism where you can say, look, if I would have taken some sort of action from a guy that I knew committed a crime, and then he commits another crime that it might have been prevented, is there any way to hold that guy responsible? Is there any kind of scenario like that? Because people are interested in that aspect of this case.
Yeah, unfortunately not in the criminal arena. And I can't, as you're talking, I was thinking, boy, that'd be interesting if somehow there was something, because again, if I'm, God forbid, the father of someone who gets killed as a result of someone not speaking up, yeah, I'd want to see that happen. But I don't know that you can legislate it. There's definitely nothing that I know of that exists in the criminal arena. Civilly, that's a different matter. Can you sue someone for something like this and maybe recover money, assuming this person has any money, which is probably not the case because you can't squeeze water from a rock? That's a different story. But criminally, I don't see it.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where sometimes the justice system and the mechanisms that we have can't answer all the demands that people have, and I completely understand that. But one of the demands that people have, and which is tragic in this particular case, is that Miss Horinga's body was never found. Okay, so where authorities looked where Kevin Bluhm had said the body was and where Willis left it, but the prosecutor said that authorities think Willis moved it. They never found the body. Mark, is there any way that we can try to find Jessica's body?
Other than how they've been searching, I have no reason to believe that the Michigan authorities haven't done everything they possibly could. People would love to go old school on Bluhm and do whatever it takes to get him to reveal it. Unfortunately, that's not constitutional. So I don't know what else can be done. It's very frustrating.
It's very frustrating. And we covered the Jeffrey Willis case. In fact, I think it was a few weeks ago when he had a hearing and he actually blew a kiss to the audience. The arrogance of this is really outstanding.
It's tough to be there in court. Listen, I've represented some monsters in my day, and I feel for the victim's family. I'll go over and just say, look, my job is very different. You know, I swore to do everything I can to help my client, but I feel for you. And I'll give the victims a hug. I feel for them in situations like this.
Yeah, I completely understand. Mark, stand by. Thank you for your analysis here on what's going on with Kevin Bluhm. But Mark and I are going to talk about another case in a little bit about the NYPD and Mayor Bill de Blasio illegally releasing body cam footage. But what I want to show for you right now, before we talk about that, is we kept talking about the Kevin Bluhm hearing. I actually want to play it for you. So we have the short hearing right now. And when we come back, Mark and I are going to talk about the next special segment about the NYPD and Mayor de Blasio. And then later on, again, at around 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to begin our live coverage again of the Jason King case out of California. But in the meantime, here is the Kevin Bluhm hearing.